Hello everybody, welcome to Sane Game Studios. I'm Sane, I'm an amateur game developer. Today on Gamemaker for Beginners, we're going to be taking a look at movement and the functions associated with it. So I'm going to be showing you guys a few different ways to handle movement, both in top-down and platformer games, and also the functions I'm going to be using to calculate that movement and how exactly they work and different ways that you can use them. So movement is a very simple yet complicated topic because movement in of itself is really easy to achieve. I can achieve some basic movement with 3 or 4 lines of code. However, there are also a ton of different ways to do movement, and they range in complexity and also depends on what you want to get out of your movement. So we're going to start off with top-down movement based on the fact that I don't need to bring in any kind of collidables to show it to you. Whereas when I bring in platformer movement, we need to introduce gravity as well. So we're going to need to do a bit more. So the first thing that I'm going to do in order to start doing this is I'm going to create a sprite. I'm going to just go ahead and call this S player. I'm going to edit the image and I'm just going to make this a yellow square. And honestly, man, I've been making games for a couple years now, and when I first start programming in my movement, this is absolutely how I do it. I always start with just squares because you should always build a mechanic and then fine-tune it. So I'm not going to program my movement with all my animations in mind. I'm going to program my movement. And then once my movement is working, then I'm going to look into adding animations. So I'm always going to start off a project just moving squares around. So now that I have this object, well, this sprite, and it has its origin right in the middle there, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to create an object to assign that sprite to. So I'm going to right-click on objects. I'm going to go create object, and I'm going to call this O_player. I'm going to go right here, and I'm going to assign it the S player sprite. And then if you watched my Gamemaker for Beginners video on object introductions, you're going to have a pretty good idea of what the different events are and what they do. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to go to the create event. And this is where we're going to go ahead and start declaring variables. And I'm going to just declare a handful of variables that I feel like I will probably need as we go. So I'm going to declare HSP, and it is going to equal 0. I'm going to declare VSP, and it is also going to equal 0. I'm going to declare my jump height, and it is going to equal 10. I'm going to declare my walk speed, and it is going to equal 5. And my gravity, and it is going to equal 0.3. And I think this is the variables I'm going to need for the sake of this tutorial. And then finally down at the bottom, I'm just going to go key left equals false, key right equals false, key down equals false, and key up equals false, just so I have my variables that I need for getting my player input. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to right click anywhere. I'm going to go to add/open event, and I'm going to go to the step event. And the step event is where you're going to do the most of your magic. It is where your game is going to fundamentally be built. You're going to be doing 90% of your coding, if not more, in the step events of various objects. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and just get all of my inputs. So I'm going to go key right equals, key left equals, key down equals, and key up equals. And then I'm going to click up here. I'm going to hold Alt because I'm on a Windows, and I'm going to highlight all 4 of these lines. And I'm going to go keyboard, check, VK underscore, and then close the bracket, semicolon. And then I'm just going to go right, left, down, and up. And that's just going to assign my my movement variables to actual key bindings on the keyboard. It's going to give me the ability to control my player. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a local variable, and I'm going to call it direction. Actually, no, I'm going to use the built-in direction variable. I just finished recording a video on built-in variables. I'm going to use the built-in one. So I'm going to use point direction. Alright, so this is going to be the first function that we are going to be looking at. So what does point direction do? So it is rather simple. I'm going to bring up my Microsoft Paint to explain this to you guys. And essentially, we're going to have a point. Just like that. And we're going to call this point 0, 0, which means that it is point 0 on the x-axis and point 0 on the y-axis, which in terms of the game is going to put it in the very top left corner of your game. And then with point direction, what we're going to do is we're going to feed it this point, and then we're going to create a second point, and we're going to get the angle between those 2 points. So let's say I'll create a second point right here. And this point is going to be 1, 0. And it is going to have a direction that looks like this, which is going to give it a value of 0 degrees. Then let's say I put a point up here. And let's say this point is 1, 1, which should be 1, negative 1. So what happens is I'm moving up 1 point on the y-axis from 0, 0, and up is always negative, so it's going to be negative 1, and then I'm moving right on the x-axis 1 point, which is going to give me a 1, so I'm going to be 1 on the x-axis, negative 1 on the y-axis, and it is going to create an angle that looks roughly like this. And point direction is going to look at this point here, and this point here, and it is going to give me the direction between those 2 points. And what it's going to do is it's actually going to give me a direction of 45, because that is 45 degrees. And if I do the same thing here, which will be a point of 0 and negative 1, it is going to have a direction like this. And this is going to be 90 degrees. So, essentially all that's happening is we are creating a circle. I know it's not a perfect circle. And we are also creating a single point in the center of that circle. And then we are going to be looking at any possible direction on that circle based on the points that we give it. Right? So this will be 0 degrees, but it will also be 360 degrees. This will be 45 because the circle is always going to go counterclockwise. This will be a 90. This will be a 135, a 180, a 225, a 270, and a 315. And that is really all that we're doing with point direction, is we're going to take a center point, we're going to compare it to a second point that we are going to be creating, and then we are going to get the angle between those 2 points. So now the question is going to be, how do we create that second point? So to do that, I'm going to go back to Gamemaker, and I do have a little bit more explaining to do before we get much deeper into this. And we have these variables here, and they're always going to be true or false. In my create event, I set them up to be false. Then in the step event, if I'm holding any of these keys, they are going to be true while those keys are pressed. So a really interesting thing about Booleans is what these are called, true or false, they're called Booleans, is that they don't actually have a value of true or false. They have a value of 0 or 1. 0 equaling false, and 1 equaling true. And we can go ahead and we can use this to our advantage. So let's say I am pressing down the right key and I am not pressing down the left key. So that is going to mean that key right is going to equal true, which means it is also going to equal 1. And then key left is going to equal false, and it is going to equal 0. So that tells me that key right minus key left is going to equal 1. Because it is the same thing as 1 minus 0, which is going to equal 1. But if I change this up a little bit, and let's say that key right is now going to equal false, so it is going to equal 0. And then key left is going to equal true, so it is now going to equal 1. I can do that same thing. I can go key right minus key left, which is going to equal 0 minus 1, which is going to equal -1. Are you with me so far? So let's say that I want a value, a direction of 45 degrees. I want to grab that direction. Right? So to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say that key right is true. So key right equals true. Which means that it equals 1. Key left equals false, so then it equals 0. But I'm also going to be holding the up key. So I'm going to say that key up is going to equal true. Which means that key up also means 1. And then key down is going to equal false, which means that it also equals 0. So then I can say that key right minus key left is going to equal 1 minus 0, which is going to equal 1. And I also can say that key down minus key up is going to equal 0 minus 1, and it is going to equal -1. Which means that if I take these two values and put them together, I can get the coordinate of 1 and -1. So, let's use that. So the first thing in point direction is it is going to ask me for x1 and y1, and that is going to be the original point. I want that original point to be the center of that circle. So I'm going to give it a value of 0, 0. Then the next value that it wants is x2 and y2, and that is going to be the coordinates of the point that I want to look at. And I am going to feed it key right minus key left, and then I'm also going to feed it key down minus key up. And that is going to take my inputs and use those inputs to create a direction. And I'm going to be using that direction to calculate my movement. So the next thing I want to do is I want to be calculating my horizontal speed and my vertical speed. And that is how far in the x-axis that I need to move to reach that point, as well as how far in the y-axis I need to move to reach that point. And Gamemaker does have a couple built-in functions for this, and these are going to be the next functions that I'm going to look at. So we have two functions that are almost the same, and they are length underscore dir for direction. One of them is x, and the other is y. So I messed up how they are spelled. Lengthdir, and then x and y. There we go. They've gone yellow. Those are the functions. So what do these do? So what they do is they take a direction that we have gotten here, and they are going to figure out how far in each value to move a certain distance in that direction. So to explain it better, we're going to go back to Microsoft Paint. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to erase this. So I have a walk speed of 5, right? So let's say I want to move 45 degrees, and I want the length of this to be 5. But if anyone's ever done trigonometry, you know that the amount that I have to move in the x-axis is less than 5, and the amount that I have to move in the y-axis is less than 5. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell lengthdir x and lengthdir y that I want to move this far in that direction, and lengthdir x is going to calculate the distance that I need to move horizontally to reach that distance in that direction, and then lengthdir y is going to calculate how far vertically that I need to move in that direction. So to do that, I'm going to go back here, and the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to feed it the length. The length that I want to move is what I stored in my walk speed variable. The direction that I want to move is the direction that I've already established. I have figured out the direction that I want to move by getting my player input and comparing it to a dead coordinate, and then using that to calculate the direction of desired movement. So I'm going to do that for both x and y. And then realistically, the only thing that I still have to do is I have to just update my coordinates. So I can just go x equals itself plus my horizontal speed. And y is going to equal itself plus my vertical speed. And then if I go into my room now, and I grab my object and I place it in my room, I'm going to make my room bigger just so we can actually see this. Turn off viewports. I'm just going to run this project, and we're going to see how well I build some movement. So I did forget a really important step, and that is I forgot to see whether or not I'm currently adding any kind of input. Because what happens is if I am not pressing any keys, I am looking at 0, 0 compared to 0, 0, which is going to not quite throw an error, but it's going to default to a direction of 0, which is going to have me moving to the right. So I'm actually going to create a local variable, and I'm going to call it any key, and it is going to equal key right minus key left does not equal 0, or key down minus key up does not equal 0. And then I'm going to say if any key equals true. And as you can see, I'm able to move diagonally, side to side, up and down. And that is how you do some basic movement using Lengthdir X and Lengthdir Y. So if you're curious what exactly it is that I am doing here, I am bringing in a local variable, and a local variable is created by declaring var. You don't have to start them with an underscore like I do. That is just part of my naming conventions. Any local variable that I create is going to start with an underscore. But a local variable is something that is created and then used at this line, at this point in the step event. And when the step event is over, so when we reach the bottom of the step event and we enter into the next frame, this variable is going to be deleted from memory. It is no longer going to be needed. It is no longer going to be used. Gamemaker is going to completely forget it. But on the next frame, when it reaches this point again, it is going to redeclare itself. So they cannot be used to store value between multiple frames, but they can be used to store a value in any given frame. Usually when I build functions or something, I'm going to build them entirely with local variables. That's going to be a future video that I'm going to be coming up with that is going to explore not only more functions, but I'll also be making another video that is going to explore how to create functions and what they can do for you. But essentially all I am saying here is that if this does not equal 0, set any key to true. But if this does not equal 0, if either of these statements are true, then set any key to equal true. But if both of these statements are false, then any key is going to equal false. So when I check if any key is true here, then I know that I am pressing any single key. And if I am pressing any key, I want to be able to move. Otherwise, I don't want to be able to move. But as you can see here, I am moving on my x-axis and my y-axis separately. And there is another way to do this. To demonstrate, I'm going to be needing to create another object. And I'm going to call this O-Wall. And I'm going to be creating another sprite for this object. And I'm going to be making it a bright blue. And I'm going to call this S-Wall. I'm going to go back to my O-Wall object, and I'm going to give it that sprite. And then in my room, I'm going to go ahead and zoom out a little bit. I'm going to place a couple of these walls. And what this is going to do is it's going to give me something to collide with. Because with the way that I am doing my my movement here, moving each axis separately, I'm going to need to run my own collision checks. So I can go ahead and I can do that, and I can go if place meeting x plus HSP y O-Wall HSP equals 0. And then if place meeting x y plus VSP O-Wall VSP equals 0. I can go ahead and I can write in these two lines, and these are going to be collision checks, and they're going to tell me whether or not I'm currently colliding with a wall. I will be releasing a video soon on collision functions, different types of them, and ways that you can use them. If you want to see that, please subscribe and take a look, and it's coming soon. So with these collision functions in place, I can go ahead and I can run this project again. And as you can see, I have my walls there. And I can not walk through them. I can butt up against them. I can get close to them. But under no circumstance will I ever be able to actually walk through them. But Gamemaker does actually have a fancy built-in function that is going to handle these collisions for me. So I actually do not need them. So here, instead of moving on each axis separately, I'm going to call a new function. I'm going to call it move and collide. And it does exactly what it sounds like. It is going to move me, but then it is also going to check for collisions. And way down here at the bottom, you're going to see the different types of arguments that this function is going to need to be able to run properly. Any arguments that show up in square brackets, like num iterations, x off, y off, max x move, and max y move, those are optional arguments. You can go ahead and feed them in, but you do not need them. You only need these three here, the dx, dy, and obj. And this is going to be the desired x movement, the desired y movement, and the object that you wish to collide with. So my desired x movement is going to be my HSP, and my desired y movement is going to be my VSP. The object that I want to check for a collision with is my O wall. And if I run this again, you're going to see it's going to work pretty much the same. If anything, it works a little bit better because I actually have pixel perfect collisions with this. I didn't program pixel perfect collisions into my place meeting checks, although it would have been simple enough to do. But as you can see, move and collide handles this for me. And Move and Collide actually does one more thing that is really cool, and it is honestly probably the only thing, in my opinion, that makes Move and Collide worth using. And I'll show it to you. So I'm going to go back to my workspace. I'm going to open up my S wall. I'm going to go to my collision mask, and right here where it says type, rectangle, I'm going to change it to rectangle with rotation. I am then going to go to my room, and I'm going to put in a wall, and I'm going to give it a rotation of 45 degrees. And then I'm going to stretch it out like that. I'm now going to run this, and Move and Collide handles the slope for me, which is a really cool feature that Move and Collide does. Slopes can be a bit of a pain in the butt to program in yourself, but with Move and Collide, you are able to just have a built-in function that is going to handle all of your slopes, and it is honestly going to be a bit of a game changer when it comes to things like platformer movement, which platformers don't really look super natural. Don't really look all that natural without some kind of slopes. So to have a collision built in that is going to handle slopes is honestly a great thing. There are honestly a lot of other movement functions that I could go over, but most of them are tied more to the physics engine. I'm talking like motion add and things like this. This is not something that I'm really going to dive into on this. I just wanted to do the basics of getting movement going. And we have already covered top-down movement. So I'm going to do the exact same thing, but for platformer movement. And to do that, I'm going to want to rearrange my room a little bit. Not much. That should be enough. So one of the most important things when you're looking at platformer movement is you're going to have things like gravity and stuff that need to actually be applied. With top-down games, you are looking down at the ground, so the fact that you are on the ground is insinuated. It doesn't matter where in a top-down game that you are standing, if you do not explicitly design that space to be a hole, then it is going to be ground. Whereas with platformers, you actually need to fall and land on the ground, which is where my grav or gravity variable is going to come into play. I'm going to be using that variable to calculate my gravity, and I'm going to be using it to fall. There's a couple things I'm going to be doing that are going to be a little bit similar, but there's going to be a handful of things I'm going to be doing that are going to be worlds apart. So first of all, for a platformer game, for what I'm building, I don't need key down. I need key right, key left, and key up. I'm going to be creating another local variable, and I'm going to be calling it move. And it is going to equal key right minus key left. And if you've noticed, I always use key right minus key left and never key left minus key right. And there is a very basic reason for this. I'm going to go back to Microsoft Paint to explain it. So everything in Gamemaker is designed on a grid. So let's say I have a grid, and then right here in the center, let's say this is 0, 0. And you can think of 0, 0 not as being 0, 0, but in the sake of movement, 0, 0 is going to represent our current position. And we are going to want to be moving. So this is actually created of two axes. You have the x-axis and the y-axis. And with the x-axis, you have minus going this way, and you have plus going this way. So when you head to the right, you are moving positively. You're moving up in the x-axis. And when you're moving down, you're moving negatively. You are moving, down in the x-axis. That's to the left. The y-axis is a little bit counterintuitive because the game always considers the top left corner to be the true 0, 0. So then as you move downwards, your y-axis is going to grow. So positive is down. And then negative is up. So I'm using my key right minus key left as an example of whether I want to move left or right. And I'm using key right minus key left. And the reason why I'm doing that is because if key right is 1, so it is true, and key left is 0, so it is false, I have 1 minus 0, and that is going to equal 1. I can then take this 1, and I can take my speed, and I can multiply it by this 1, and it is going to equal a positive value. Therefore, I will move in the positive direction. Whereas, if my left key is positive, it's going to have a value of 1. But if my right key is negative, which means it's false, which means I am not pressing my right key, then it is going to have a value of 0. And I'm going to get 0 minus 1, and it is going to equal negative 1. So I'm doing the same thing as I am here, but instead, my speed, which I'm going to just use s this time, is going to be multiplied by negative 1. And it is going to equal a negative number. So if I move in this value here, I'm going to be moving in the negative direction to the left. And that is where this value comes into play. This value is going to be containing either this negative or this positive. And it's always going to be a negative 1, a 1, or a 0. Another good thing about this is that if I'm pressing both the right and left key at the same time, it'll be 1 minus 1 equals 0, and I won't move at all. I don't want to have any kind of conflict happening between direction and movement. So this is a great, easy way to have them cancel each other out so they're not trying to fight each other. I am then going to take my horizontal speed, and it is going to equal my walk speed times move. And that is exactly what I am doing here. So if my walk speed, if my move variable is positive 1, my walk speed is going to be positive 5, and my horizontal speed is going to be positive 5. So when I add that to my x position, then I am going to be moving in the right direction. Whereas if my left key is being pressed, my walk speed is going to have a value of -5 because I'm multiplying it by -1, and my horizontal speed is going to have a negative value and be moving to the left. So it's going to control which way that I am moving based on which key is being pressed. I also want to change my key up to key up pressed. That way when I press the up key and I jump, I only jump once on the frame that I press it. But one thing I'm constantly going to be doing is I'm going to be adding gravity to my vertical speed. And when I go plus equals, that is the same thing as going equals itself plus. This line here is the exact same as this line here. It is just a shorter, quicker way to type it. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to run a collision check to see whether or not I am going to be hitting the ground on the y-axis. So if place meeting x, y plus VSP, O wall, I'm going to set my VSP to equal 0 because I don't want to keep falling if I am landing on a wall. But then also, if I'm currently on the ground and I press the jump key, so if key up VSP minus equals jump height. And then finally, I'm going to use move and collide just for my horizontal positioning. So HSP 0, because I don't actually want to use it for my vertical collisions. O wall. But then I need to update my y-axis. So y plus equals VSP. Now as you see, I land nicely on the ground. I'm able to move side to side. And I can jump. But again, another really cool thing about move and collide is that I can, at any point in time, add a slope and then I can just walk up that slope. Which is easily the best thing about move and collide, is built-in slopes. So the way that I would normally handle movement, which does not account for slopes, in this collision check, I would also say while not place meeting x, y plus VSP times 0.5 O wall VSP times equals 0.5 y plus equals VSP. And then finally, I'd set my VSP to 0, and that's going to be a much smoother collision. And then I would also say if place meeting x plus HSP y O wall while not place meeting x plus HSP times 0.5 y O wall HSP times equals 0.5 x plus equals HSP HSP equals 0. And this is going to give me pixel perfect collisions, doing my collision detection myself. And then this right here is actually what gets me my pixel perfect collisions. If you don't know what while is, that's absolutely fine. It is honestly a very dangerous loop. I have broken many games. I have completely frozen my computer using while loops. And I don't recommend using them unless you know exactly what you're doing with them. If you were to copy this code, though, it will work just fine. But I will have a video coming up on my channel with more information on loops and different types of loops and when and how to use them. It will be up sometime in the upcoming weeks. But I can now replace this move and collide with just x plus equals HSP. And this is normally how I handle my movement. But that's all that I wanted to talk to you about today. I just wanted to explain some of the basic functions that you're going to be encountering when you start calculating movement and what they actually do. A good example of functions that have a lot more usage than just calculating movement is the Lengthdir X and Lengthdir Y. There are a lot of things that you can use those functions for. This was just using movement as an example, but this is absolutely far from the only use case for those functions. Same thing with like point direction. You can use that to get the direction between any 2 points for any purpose that you need that for. Again, I just used it for movement because it made sense to use it for movement. But that is all that I wanted to talk to you about today. I just wanted to do a quick crash course on movement functions and what they do and do an actual explanation into what each of those functions are doing. I got a request from one of my viewers to do videos on just built-in functions, and there are way too many of them to just go ahead and build one video on them. I could make a 6-hour-long video and not even get close to doing them all. So I figured I would start off with just doing some movement ones. I will be doing collisions next, and then we can start looking at things like drawing functions and stuff like this. So I'm going to thank you very much for watching. I do really appreciate it. I like making these tutorials. I like it when people are watching them and learning how to make games. It is a passion of mine, and I really do like bringing people into that passion, bringing people into the game dev community, and just having more indie games to play. It's a lot of fun. Some of the best games I've played have just been in game jams where they are made by one person over a weekend. They were a good time. But if you enjoyed this video and you're looking for more content on how to code and create games with Gamemaker, feel free to subscribe to my channel. I do absolutely take tutorial requests. For the first time in a while, my requests actually is a list, and I have quite a few requests to get through. So I always put community requests at the top of my tutorial lists, but it is also on a first come first served basis. So when somebody requests a tutorial, it will be added to the bottom of the requested tutorials list, but they will always be above the tutorials that I was planning to do without request. So yes, thank you very much for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe. If you have any questions, comment them. I will absolutely go out of my way to help you out. And that's all that I got. So have a good one. Peace out. You guys are awesome.